this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. The first order of business today is we'd like to welcome Mr. George Nodland back to the commission. He's been on this before and did an excellent job, and we're glad that he's back with us. Thank you, George. And before we get started, we do have standard motions available. We'd like you to all use them if possible. It makes it much clearer for record keeping and the legal aspects of what the motion intent was and its actual description. First order of business on the standard motions and the minutes will be the minutes dated November 16th, 2011. We'll do these separately. Is there a motion for approval for the minutes dated November 16th?
Mr. Chairman, I've got one.
Okay,
correction.
Mr. Jackson.
In item 6, about halfway through that large paragraph, I think we need to correct that. What I was trying to say is, I think what was said is, I'd like to see a paved street and not private use of a dedicated right-of-way. See the sentence I'm talking about there? If we could make that correction.
Is that clear with everyone on that?
So I'd move to approve with those corrections.
Okay. Any other additions or corrections? Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion with the correction, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes approved. We also have the minutes dated December 21st, 2011. This time I'd ask for a motion. A motion to approve. Is there a second? A second?
Mr. Chairman, just one correction there, too. If I
Okay, Mr. Jackson.
In item 9, the third paragraph from the bottom, we were talking about parklands and the value, and I think it should read as it is based on developed ground instead of raw ground. We were concerned that the dollars might be too high.
Anyone else have any insight on that comment? Does that sound correct? Is there a second to the motion? There is a second. Sorry, is there further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve minutes dated December 21st with corrections signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes approved. First order of business on our regular agenda today is a rezoning request. It's to consider a rezone petition for the Roars development from AG to GC, R3, R2, R1, P, and GI. The plat is situated in the south half of Section 31, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It is approximately 248 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Nygaard speaks, I had put in R1 mistakenly. That has been removed as part of the motion requirements. It's not depicted on his site plan, just for clarification for everybody in the audience. There is not a single-family designation. It is R3 and R2, but not single-family, which is R1.
Okay. Everyone see that?
Mr. Chairman, but Ed, are we
Ralph?
talking about 248 acres, or are we talking about 169 acres?
I will let the applicant clarify that.
Okay.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Nygaard.
I'm Larry Nygaard from Roars Development. Welcome, and I'm here to talk about a new development that we're proposing in the west part of Dickinson, right along exit 59 and Interstate I-94. You have before you a color map, I think. Do all of you have the benefit of a color map? If not, I can hand some out here. Anyway, what we have planned here is a total parcel of about 208 acres, of which 40 acres is withheld by the current owner as their homestead. And that's held out as AG. So we're looking at replatting, or rezoning rather, 168 acres total. So the colored map indicates 168 acres. Does that answer your question, Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Okay. You can see from the map you have in front of you that a large part of this is commercial, and that's primarily focused on what would be eventually a business loop, and then around on the Interstate 94. And of course, the idea there is to capture the commercial interest that's moving to Dickinson. There's certainly a lot of interest in that exchange as an ideal spot for new retailers and services that want to move to Dickinson to locate, and so we hope to accommodate them with this type of zoning. You'll see that the commercial land that we have proposed is buffered in all cases, just about all cases, with an R3 transition. We believe that that's an important way to transition into eventually the R2, which can either be single-family or townhome type developments. Some of the builders that we've worked with in the past have asked us to zone things R2, giving them the flexibility to do either twin homes or single-family. We also have a large park that strings through the center of the property. You'll notice there's an area of zone GI, and that's because that is an existing oil well. And so we're zoning an area around that oil well, GI, and I think that's what's required by the statutes here in Dickinson. But otherwise, primarily it's for the most part, general commercial, buffered with R3, and then some R2 nestled in. I'm available for any questions or comments. Happy to answer them.
I have a question on the park, the P part of it. And now, is that your private dedication for park, or is that something that you're giving up
Well,
to the
we
city
have-
park district?
We have met with the Park District, at least I have met with the president of that. We've talked about some different alternatives for whether it would be cash or land. In this particular case, the land is going to be set aside as a park. I don't know if it's public or private. It depends on how our negotiations end up. We've also talked about the possibility of maybe enhancing the park. But again, those discussions are preliminary at this point. We do think that that area is not ideally suited for development, housing, or whatnot, but a park seems to be a natural fit with the housing that's going to be nestled on either side of it. So I don't have an answer for you at this point. I think that'll come in our next phase. One of the things that we're doing alongside of this, well, there's several things. The site poses some real constraints for us. We have to move a lot of dirt to make what you see in front of you happen. So we're in the process of negotiating that, how we can handle that. We've also got a large drainage area that we need to accommodate. We're working with engineers now to calculate how we can perhaps channel that and make it a little more efficient, and that involves discussions with both Game and Fish and the Highway Department. We've got an oil line or two that stretch through this that are going to have to be rerouted, and so we're working with ConocoPhillips on rerouting that. And we're also working with a traffic consultant. We're trying to determine the number of trips generated from this area, and that will help us lay out our roads and eventually the stoplights and how the traffic flows in the area. So there are a lot of pieces that we still have yet to put in place, and that's why, along with this zoning request, there isn't a plating request, because we've still got some pieces we need to work out, but we need to start with some broad-based assumptions, and this is where we'd like to start with our zoning. That's why we're here today.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
you know, along the same lines as your question, I think the zoning makes sense looking at it. But the question I'd have for Mr. Corton and maybe Mr. Colling, I think there are a lot of details that we'll need to work with the developer on. I can see a need for some traffic analysis and some of the water sewer question, I'm sure we'll need a development agreement. Are we satisfied leaving all that to the plating stage and not addressing it at the time of rezoning?
That's a call as a commission if you want to bring forth for that. I'm satisfied because we've been working with Mr. Nygaard for at least 6 months on this project. We've had discussions with DOT with respect to the interchange of improvements, of future dedications that may be required for this development, of stacking along the road itself or having access to that. Mr. Nygaard, per our recommendations, has started a transportation study to determine the trips that will be generated, and then with respect to that, how to address the circulation in the development and also on the accompanying roads. When it comes to the plating side of that, yes, that's where we can get the dedications that would be necessary for it. Our current development regulations would address a lot of those issues as well. So I feel comfortable the way it's proceeding. You as a commission, though, my recommendation on the motion, either way you want to go, would be prior to the rezone to be finalized, it has to be annexed in the city. It has to be annexed. We've already started that process in essence before you can get any urban services. So we'll address that as well. But if you as a commission want to have a development agreement in order to address those, that's fine. But on staff level, we're already in talks with the developer already, and I'm comfortable without that. So it's your call.
I think I would be comfortable as long as you guys are. I just want to make sure we're doing it.
Mr. President, Commissioners, I concur with Mr. Corton. I'm comfortable going ahead with the rezoning at this time and dealing with the development agreement issues at the time of plating. I do think it makes sense to go forward with the annexation at this time and start that process rolling. But as far as the rezoning request, I think staff would have no objection to that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Nygaard, you're fairly sure that then, with this zoning request and the way you've laid it out, this is what your future plans are, how it could be utilized the best
Yeah,
for
if-
your development?
If I were to take a look from 10,000 feet up, down, this is what I see right now. Again, the traffic study is already starting to change our mind about where a road might go or how we might shape things, and that might change a little bit on how we look at the land use. But this is essentially what we're hoping to accomplish at the end of the day.
Now, the land use on the GI part of it, where you say there's an existing oil well,
Yes.
what are the future possibilities of another hole being drilled there?
Well, it's hard to get an answer from anybody that knows anything from the oil companies, but what I've learned is that that well is not producing today, and that many in the area have been, they're no longer working, and some of them have been abandoned and reclaimed. So I really don't know in terms of whether there might be more wells there in the future. I'm hoping it goes away.
But in the future, if somebody wanted to go in there and drill into another formation, is that site viable for that?
Well, I think we have about 2 acres there, and I guess we'd have to work with the oil company. That's one of the things we're in the process of working with now. We just found a contact in Billings who I'll be working with to negotiate both the line itself and relocation of it, and then how to deal with the well that's there.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Nada? Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Nygaard, couple questions, if I may. The first one is you've got a Phase 1 and a Phase 2.
Yes.
So you're anticipating Phase 1 to be immediate this year?
Well, should I go over the timing with you? I mean, we hope that, we're going to work with the city for the next, 90 to 120 days to fine-tune everything. While we're working with the city, the dirt work that I spoke of earlier is going to begin in April, and so is the relocation of the lines, or at least the starting of that. So, simultaneous to that, we're working with the city to bring utilities from the States Addition, which is just south of this, across hospital property, across NDSU property, under the interstate, and begin to service this. We've already got contracts let, and design has been underway determining that. So we all hope that that comes together in about August of this year, where we can then begin putting utilities within this development, and we hope that by the end of the season next year, we have some roadways put in. So that would be the timing that we hope.
And the second question, your park area, is that a wetland?
Part of it is, yes. There's part of it that's a wetland, part of it that isn't. And what we're working with the, I think it's FEMA, if I'm not mistaken. I get some of those agencies mixed up. But we're working with them about how that area can be encroached and filled. It's not, there are no permanent wetlands in there. It's not, it's in the floodway right now. I think that's the right word, in the floodway.
So you're probably working with the Corps.
With the Corps, okay. And we're determining how we can encroach on that and just what the shape of that looks like when we're all finished. So
Thank you.
those pieces are still moving.
Mr. Chairman, one comment, Mr. Nygaard, with the general industrial in the center for that 2 acres, and your hopes are that you reach an agreement with Mr. Klein that that well goes away, would you have any protest to leaving it zoned R2?
No, I'd love to. I thought when we read the Dickinson ordinances, it said it had to be zoned GI. I'm happy to leave it R2. I mean, I hope it goes away, that's what I hope, but, and if it did, it would become part of R2, absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to that, this is the GI or the general industrial would be in the center of the development. If the applicant wants to leave it that way, I think that's fine. The impacts would be associated with his development, not with surrounding properties. The use is already there. I would be fine with labeling it as an R2. There is not the necessity that you have to label it as an industrial. We have oil wells all throughout the area that are ag, residential, and so forth. So we allow them in all various zoning districts. So I'm fine if you want to revise a motion either way to allow an R2 for that area. It would make more sense with the obvious contingency that he has to work with the people that own the oil well. They're not going to give up their rights unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't see that will probably ever happen, but if in case that does, it makes sense for that to be residential than industrial in the middle of his development.
Mr. Colling, I have a question about that, on that idea. If it would go to R2, it would be requested, recommended, the people who have the well there, what are their rights as far as using that site again, if it goes to R2?
It would be, Mr. President, a non-conforming use in that situation. So the operator of that property would be able to continue to operate that as an oil well. But if that use ever went away, they would not be able to reestablish that use without going through a zoning rechange.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
but at
Rockwell.
any time, we could leave it as such, and the developer could come back in and rezone at any time if this site goes away to R2, right?
Well, I guess we got to look at it this way with respect to your question, Mr. Elkin. The property is zoned ag, so, upzoning it to R2 allows him more affordability. If it went away and he decided to do an industrial use, he'd have to rezone anyway. I guess the question is, with Mr. Nygaard, the well is there, but are they there due to mineral rights, or are they there due to a deed that they have for the property?
I believe it's just the mineral rights.
Okay, so you own the above ground. So the ownership of it is the applicant and not the oil company.
And if it makes anyone more comfortable, you want to change that to R2, I'm fine with that. I don't want industrial in the middle of my R2 anyway, unless it has to be there because it's there already.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Gulash?
Mr. Nygaard, just on behalf of the Park District, I guess I would ask before you come back to this board with a preliminary, that you get on our schedule to come to one of our meetings before we have a preliminary plat that we're looking at.
Absolutely. I think my approach is going to be, once we get the traffic studies and the trip generations, we're going to be able to refine this one more time, and then we're going to talk about parks, walking trails, all of that, I think, at that stage. So we do have some more work to do, but we've got to start someplace, and this is the best place.
Any other questions for Mr. Nygaard? Any other comments?
I do have one question. If we do go ahead and rezone this, does this have any bearing on the park whatsoever?
I don't know, maybe you can be clear on this, but I think there's a question about what can be done with that property that you have listed as parks because of the different agencies that deal with wetlands, drainages. So you're probably right, caught in between right now, what can actually be done with some of that property, right?
Yeah, I just don't have some of the answers.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I could add some clarification. You want to go first?
Mr. Khan?
You know, the issue of the park, that was one that we spoke to Mr. Nygaard about. I mean, designating the area, I know he's going to work with FEMA. He'll probably have to do a LOMA, local map amendment, if he wants to encroach in it or further define those boundaries. I know in particular he wants to do that with respect to the floodplain that's going through the GC property in order to channel that. That makes sense. The remaining park portion of that, they are looking at incorporating amenities for their development, and they've been very receptive to staff's recommendations of providing, you know, in addition to having the floodplain, you would have that designated. You would also have a trail system that would be an enhancement or an amenity for all the residential zones. I mean, if you have floodplain, you definitely would like to augment it with a walking trail or something. That's a nice amenity for all the residential around it, for people to use, not just have it as a preserve area. So I know that they're looking at working at it. With respect to the park question, our current ordinance talks about dedications of land up to 5% or fee in lieu for residentially zoned properties. So the area that would be required would be whatever the total acreage would be for our residentially zoned properties on that. But I know that they will be working with the Parks District on this. If there's something that, you know, the Parks District and the applicant, you know, do not agree upon, whenever this comes through as part of plating, you could change that P and require it to be another designation, just you would, you know, a residential designation. I think it makes sense to have it as a preserve area, and you know that there won't be any development within that. So I think ultimately they'll work with the Parks District. We'll have coordination with that. We've been working with Mr. Nygaard and talking to them about discussing that with the Parks District anyway. So I feel confident that augmenting that with the residential area will be a natural thing that they'll do. And it's something that as staff, we've been pushing as well. So
Thank you, Mr.
I hope that
Cortana.
answers your question.
Mr. Jackson?
Well, just to reiterate, you know, it's not just parks. There's all kinds of, I don't know if you want to say issues, that I expect the developer is working on, including the parks. That's why I asked the question, if the staff is comfortable that we leave the resolution of all those issues to the plating process. And I'm hearing that we are.
I think so. I think that's what I'm hearing. And I'm thinking for the parks, like there's a point in time when you're going to come to a resolve with, when it gets to that point of property in lieu of cash or the opposite. And there's certain areas of this that are not going to be usable for anything but wetlands. And so you guys will come to a natural point in time when the parks and the developer come to an agreement. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Krieg?
I guess I'm just a little bit confused, because I thought that's some of what we were trying to get away from, is people coming in and saying, your park's going to be in this wetland. And I know it's maybe not so-called a wetland, you know, floodway, whatever, but, and I think that's maybe somewhat what Scott was trying to say, is you're basically saying, this is where the park's going to go. That may not be where they want to have it, or that type of land. And again, it's probably more so on some other areas with true wetlands and things than this, but I'm just bringing up the point because I thought we were trying to get away from some of that.
No, I think, I'll clarify. My point is that I believe under the new ordinance and the new structure that's proposed for money in lieu of property, that it's totally up to the Park District's discretion. And am I clear on it, Mr. Kovacs? It's written so if the Park District has their discretion whether they want to take property, what property is acceptable, and if not, the value they will receive in monetary value. Instead of that this is totally a vague proposal, and some of this property is not going to be used for anything, but they may be given an opportunity for a proposal from the developer to have an opportunity to do something, if they choose. But I'm clear that it's the Park District's discretion. Is that right, Mr. Catan?
It's their discretion to provide a recommendation. It's ultimately you as a planning commission to accept that. So, to answer your question, yes. The applicant, Mr. Nygaard, could come in and say, this is where I want to put it, and the Parks District could say, we're not in favor of it because we want it to be more of a functional park instead of a passive park. And if that's the case, then the recommendation would be that we think it should be over here. You as a planning commission then would factor that decision in, and you could require that. You could say, no, we want this to be a functional park, it needs to be located in this area, and recommend that as part of your plat. And then the applicant can either accept that or not. So you have, ultimately, it's a commission and then the city commission as well that has that ability to require that in a certain location if you feel that that makes sense as part of your adoption or approving of a plat. So I think we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves in some ways here. We will have that ability because they're going to have to come back and go through the platting process for it. The applicant, in essence, if you really look at it this way, has downzoned a significant portion of their property by labeling it as park. There's nothing else going to go in there. There's no development expectation with that. So I'm very much in favor of it, and as they were, that they were going to do that, and then they'll negotiate and work with the Parks District and see what needs to be done. Should this area be and we're working with the Parks District on determining areas that they feel would be appropriate for future parks. This location may be, this area may not be. If it's not, then it makes sense to do payment in lieu. But that's all part of our whole process that we're doing as part of our comprehensive plan as well. So I think all these will come together in the next couple of months for that. If they're not, then you as a commission could look at it and go, we don't feel comfortable with it. We think the park should be designated here per the recommendation of the Parks District. You can make that call. Or you could say that, if you don't feel comfortable with that, you could do a development agreement when it comes to the planning process as well.
Thank you, Mr. Croton. Mr. Colling, does that sound like a correct opinion?
I think that's correct. One thing that I think does bear mentioning is that rezoning this to a P district is not a dedication of a park. It's actually a public district, and there are things other than parks that can go into a public district. Dickinson State University, for example, is in a P district. It's a public district. So we'll have to come back at the platting stage and determine where exactly a park would go. But as far as the rezoning request, I think, as Mr. Corton said, staff are in agreement with the proposal as it's been presented.
And I do think, I didn't mean to get ahead of things, but I did want to get ahead of things because I didn't want the agreements between the Park District and the developer to actually slow down the process. So the sooner that you deal with the
Yeah.
Park District, the better.
Yes. Well, we're all anxious to get this rolling. Spring is just around the corner.
Yep. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I could just add that I've already talked to Mr. Nygaard about, and they have spoken to DOT about trying to link the proposed trail park system across the interstate, with respect to a redesigning of that bridge and then linking it with, properties further with NDSUs and the rest. So, they are looking at not just their project, but making it a holistic, pathway system in order to accommodate not just their project, but the areas around the general vicinity as well.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Nygaard.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone else who would like to make comment on this rezoning request, please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comments? We'll close the public portion of this hearing. At this time, I'd ask for a motion. Yeah.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezone petition from AG to GC, R3, R2, P, and GI as depicted in the application materials as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkin.
I'll second that with the addition of prior to approval of the rezone petition, the property shall be annexed into the city. Also, the deletion of GI and move that to R2 in that district, in that rezoning process.
Mr. Hanson, are you in agreement with that? Yeah. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I think it's a well-developed plan, and hopefully they'll move further along with it at a very good rate. And I think the Friends of the Park Walkways will be happy to hear about their holistic approach. Any other discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Rezoning request recommended. Thank you, Mr. Nygaard. This time we have item 2 on our regular agenda is a preliminary plat. It's to consider a preliminary plat for the Cooks Meadow Hills subdivision. This is the remainder of the land for the Cooks Meadow Hills and is located in the northwest quarter of Section 28, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. The property is approximately 104 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Harvey Schneider with Tillman Engineering Company. Excuse me. With me is Mike Cook, the owner and developer for this proposed subdivision. The plat is located in the northwest quarter of Section 28, 140, 96. As previously discussed, the entire remaining property of the Cook Meadow Hills subdivision is included in this preliminary plat. As indicated, the preliminary plat as presented today is 104.84 acres. Just for information of that, 26.9 acres of that will be dedicated for roadways, and 77.94 acres will be dedicated or be used for the lots. The proposed plat's north boundary line is the 34th Street West. The south boundary would be the north property line of the Country Oaks Second Edition replat. The west boundary is State Avenue North, and then the east boundary would be the west boundary line of the Cook Meadow Hills First, Second, and Third subdivisions. The proposed plat includes all of the northwest quarter except the 4 existing parcels that were in there and then the previous Cook Meadow Hills First, Second, and Third subdivisions. The proposed plat will incorporate multiple zoning districts, and those will be presented at the next plat hearing. The annexation will be requested for the entire preliminary plat as presented today, which is also the remainder of the property owned by Mr. Cook. The Dickinson Parks and Rec has selected the cash in lieu of land at this time. There was a letter we received from the Parks and Rec dated December 13th, so stating, and then that was turned in to the planning office. We did meet with some of the utility companies and have indicated the easements that they requested on the preliminary plat as presented. The subdivision plat as we have shown it today, or the layout, is very similar to what was presented originally on the sketch plat that was presented. Just looking at the plat as laid out, it provides a structural layout, which is efficient traffic flow from the east to west and from north to south. The plat is completed, and all the information has been furnished in accordance with the City of Dickinson application requirements. Does the commission have any questions of Mike or myself at this time?
None at all. I don't have any, except that, would you just reiterate what, if there are the minor changes from this plat today as the previous one was?
We had to do some rearranging on the southern corridor. What we did, we eliminated on our previous sketch plat, I believe we had indicated some cul-de-sacs. I think we had about 3 of them. We eliminated those. We are just down to one in the southwest quadrant, right next to States. We have one cul-de-sac there. We have rearranged some of the streets, once we got looking closer as far as the drainage and the infrastructure and such, we modified some of the streets. But for the majority, the north-south streets pretty much stayed the same. We did modify some of the east-west on the southern corridor.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Yes.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nodland?
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
We see we have an oil well in there,
Yes.
and I'm looking at your plot here. How are you treating that?
Okay, we're treating that as a lot. It's indicated in there as Lot 6 in that Block 10. It's the larger lot in there.
So zoning-wise, you're not...
Well, what we're looking at is, I guess zoning-wise, looking at your regulations, we could either have the two zoning, we could leave it as agricultural or an industrial type. I believe I called it either ag or a GI zoning. Yep.
And then, if I may, Mr. Chairman, then the two streets that run up to 34th, the two approaches, you've discussed with the county?
We have not discussed that with the county. We have just been discussing that with the city.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson?
First of all, I think it's worth noting that this developer has given us a good master plan all the way through this thing. We've had a good look at the entire quarter. We've had some detail issues, which is fine. We work those out. But it's been really good to be able to look at the whole quarter like this all the way through this process. I do think we have to understand, though, this is not any kind of approval of zoning. And I know there's a map in here that's showing some suggested zoning. I'm not sure we're going to end up that way. And I realize that's not the request today, but I think we all need to understand that just because there's a map in here that's showing some suggested zoning, I don't think we need to feel bound by that at all. This is just preliminary plat approval.
Any other comments or questions? And Mr. Snyder, you're fairly clear on the process, I know you are,
Yep.
about if there to be some zoning requests down the road.
Yeah, and actually, we were here last week, and we had a meeting with Sean and Ed, and we've made some modifications to the zoning that we're going to be presenting next month, so, but we are aware of them, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Snyder? Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you.
I would like to read a letter here that, and I'm hoping that Parks and Rec, I think they have it. I'm not sure about the city schools have gotten this, but it's from Mike Cook, Cook Meadow Hills Development. And they did, in this letter, say the Dickinson Board of Park Commissions voted, this is from, I'm sorry, from Mr. Kramer to Mr. Cook. The Park Commissioners voted 3-0 Monday at its regular meeting to agree in cash of lieu of land, and they plan on working with the Dickinson Public Schools to further explore playground green space for that area of our community for the Northside Elementary School site. And he thanked them for working with the process. So Mr. Kramer sent a nice letter of comment to Mr. Cook here on the Cook Meadow Hills development. And I don't know, from the school's perspective, do you have any comments at all? Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions? This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this preliminary plat. Feel free to come forward.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Janet Perkle. I live directly south of this development, adjacent to the southwest corner that they're proposing. I have some major concerns about that southwest corner. I have some information here. There is, in my research, there is drainage through that area that I don't think is being addressed very well. I'm afraid that the water is going to, right now there is a stock dam there, and 2 ponds and sort of a swamp area that is acting as a retainage area for all the whole, this whole quarter of a section, plus the area. They're eliminating that and reducing it down to 1 lot, so this whole section of land will be retained on 1 lot that's shown there. Right now, I have, the water goes through Art Stickler's land, cuts across his pasture into my pasture, and cuts my land in half. If that becomes a waterway, my land will be cut in half, and I won't be able to get from one side of my land to the other. So I have a major concern that they have not done the study that's necessary on that drainage, and I would like to see that that is done, or if it has been done. Right now, like I said, that area is acting like a retainage area, and they are proposing to eliminate it, reduce it in size, and this is going to be streets and houses and roofs, and there's going to be more water, not less water, and they're providing less retainage onto our property. So that's my first concern. My second concern is Southwest Water has a pipeline that serves my property, Art Stickler's property, and Nancy Haroff's property that is right underneath their development. They're not taking into that water line into consideration whatsoever. There is no right-of-way for that, and I'm wondering what's going to happen to our water. That's our water supply. That's not been addressed. The second thing is, from my understanding, that is on the National Wetlands Inventory, and that also is being shown as being filled in, that area. If we have they have a little white area that they have like a drainage way. If you take all that water that's coming down there, constrict it into that little area, it's going to come shooting out like a hose. It's going to come flying through our area, maybe knock down our fences that we keep our horses in that area. So I have a concern about that also. And then the other thing that I don't see on here is Consolidated has a line that feeds Killdeer and Twin Buttes area that runs about 20-25 feet off of the States Avenue on the west side. And I see that he's got lots in there, and I think if he's going to take that hill down and fill up that stock pond, Consolidated should also be contacted, that those utilities haven't been taken into consideration. Any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you. If there's anyone else who would like to make comment on this preliminary plat, please feel free to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. My name is Art Stickler. I have property right on the south side of this development. I'm also concerned about the issues that were brought up about the water, pretty much what this lady said. Also, I think the quantity of water is going to be increased, and I think the quantity of the quality of the water is going to be decreased and the quantity increased. and we have animals there that are drinking out of these little dugouts we got. And what we'll probably have to do is close up those dugouts so that water's not standing in there. And I do have a concern about the water issue, and also a safety issue. When this developer came and put this housing up on the city place, I think it's called, is right directly east of me, the housing there. I talked to that developer at a meeting like this, and I told him my concerns about the safety issue about kids coming in through there. And we came to an agreement, and what he done, he said, Art, I'll put up a fence, and I'd like to put it on your property, a secure fence, to eliminate that problem. And he said the reason I'd like to put it on your property is because as property changes and lots, the ownership of that fence wouldn't change. So that's what we did with that development that's been there now probably 7, 8 years or more, I forget. But we've had no problems with that. I maintained a fence. The kids enjoy the horses. They're up there talking to them. And private utility people that probably don't agree with that is some of the mothers, because I see a lot of apples thrown over the fence nowadays, and I think they're robbing the fridges to get those apples. And but I think the fences really need it. And I hope Mr. Cook would consider this to put a fence up. It can be a chain link fence, and what we use so far now is that what we call a 2x4. It's got 2x4 squares in it, 6 foot high, and it does the job real well. And I think, and the kids, they're fascinated by animals and they crawl in there. We just can't have that happen. That fence has got to be done. And the water issue is a big problem there, as you heard before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sickler. This time I'm going to ask if there's anyone else who would like to make comment. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone else would like to make comment? Any comments, questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Cook.
I could add some comments. If you refer to my motions, some of the issues that have been brought up will be addressed before final plat approval. My first recommended condition would be prior to final plat approval, the drainage and grading plans will be conceptually approved by the city engineer. That will address the wetland issue, any wetlands that are on site. That will also address the flow, the volume, and how it will be designed before final plat. And if Jan wants to take a look at it, she's more than welcome, as part of disclosure when the applicant submits those plans. Those are reviewed. They're reviewed normally after the final plat's approved as part of your construction plans. That's why I said conceptually, but at least they'll have to factor in generally how they're doing that and to make sure that the existing flow that's coming onto their site as it leaves will have to be the same volume, and that they'll have to retain the impervious, they'll have to retain any additional pre or post-development flow that's coming off site. And they'll have to show that it matches and that it works per their plan. And if they can't, then they're going to have to augment it and add additional area. Per our meeting last week, they had their stormwater engineer that was working on it, and he feels very comfortable. They haven't finalized that, but to address it the way that they have shown that. So that issue will be forthcoming before final plat approval. The Southwest Water and consolidated lines, those issues can be addressed. On my second condition, we talk about a development agreement that refers to the annexation, the city developer responsibilities, funding, dedications, and infrastructure. We'll clarify that as part of the final plat of everybody's obligations, and we've already spoken generally with the developer on that we'll need to start that process to have that development agreement. So those issues can be spelled out. And if you're not comfortable with that, it could be amended at the time that you come in for final plat as well. So I think we've got those issues covered. We've been discussing those over the last couple of months with the developer.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other comments? I have one comment. I've been under the impression all along that on the preliminary plats, and that's what they are, they're preliminary, there may be lines drawn over wetlands, roads, existing utilities, but in order for the developer to go forward, always those problems have to be issued out. People have to take into consideration whether it's a pipeline, a water line, phone line, electric line, whether it's a drainage. Those things have to be considered before it can move forward, and they are considered. All parties will take consideration. But in order for a party to bring a preliminary plat, they will draw lines where they will probably be erased. So I think Mr. Corton's comments on this are very good, that those things are being considered, and developers know that when they're dealing with wetlands and utilities.
Mr. Chairman, I could also add that that the city is working with Southwest Water with respect to annexations. We'll have a meeting upcoming, I believe, in the next couple of weeks to discuss prior annexation that we did at North Industries one with respect to existing water lines. They are also aware of this annexation for Cook Meadow Hills, and that will be discussed as well. So the issue of where those water lines are with sufficient easements will be addressed as part of that annexation, part of that interagency discussion we'll have with Southwest Water. And I could also mention the one with Consolidated as well for the utilities. And I had one other issue that I wanted to mention to you, but it's escaping me at this moment.
That's
so.
okay. We can come back to it.
Chairman,
Mr. Jackson.
I'm okay with the way this is going too, but this is a significant plat, and I guess I'd like to hear the developer's engineer answer some of the questions of Ms. Perkles, because some of them I think are straightforward things. We could.
Yep.
Just to address a couple of the items, again, last week when we were out, as far as the drainage, we're aware of the drainage running through there. We're in the process of doing the drainage study and doing the ponding and such, and those would all be in accordance with the city's requirements that they're asking. We did have a preliminary draft done, and when we submit the final plat, we will be submitting the final stormwater study, showing the direction of the water and what we're doing to detain it. And one comment that was mentioned was that, there is a couple of stock dams or ponds going through there, and that's what they are. They are not, they're holding water right now, but the water generally with the drainage is free flowing through the property, is what we found there. So when we bring the final plat back, we will be working with Sean at the engineering for his approval prior to coming in with the preliminary plat. We're in the final draft form with that right now. As far as the utilities, we are providing some easements for some of the utilities. They will have to be, there are some utilities that will have to be relocated. We have been working with the electrical as far as they have an overhead line in there. They are willing that once the subdivision is started, they will relocate the overhead line and they will actually put it underground. The rural water, we're working on a plan there to incorporate and hook up the residents. There's an existing line that comes from the north and it's going to the south that serves about 4 to 5 residents to the south, and that will have to be rerouted, and the people will be taken care of. And we had to do that on the last plat we worked on also. There was a service line running across the entire parcel. So we are aware of those and are working on those. Let's see. I think that covers about the three items that are put up, and I guess with the fence, I'll let Mike comment on that if he wishes with the fence, but I don't see that being a big obstacle there.
Can you tell us a little more with that crosshatched area in the very southwest corner of the plat, that L-shaped crosshatched area?
Okay, generally what that is showing right now is that's showing the, where we're looking at redoing the ditch line or the flow line. Right now it runs at a diagonal. You can kind of see there's a little circle in there with a pond and kind of a tail to the northwest side of that. And that's where the existing water is flowing through right now. And what we're looking at doing is rerouting that. And then on the south side, there's a crosshatched area, there's a larger one. Actually, there'll be, this is just indicating where the path is. We indicate as the easement, but part of our study, it'll be in that area. There will be a pond in the area of 5, 6, and 7 that'll be retaining the water prior to the discharging of it to the south.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder, for
Thank
the
you.
clarification. I did have one question. Mr. Elkin, do you have a comment on the two streets that would go up to 34th in the county? Is there any problem foreseen there about tying in?
Mr. Chairman, Al Heiser and I have looked at this, and I believe that Al has we don't have any problems with the approach situation that they have put before us.
Mhm.
I think that's just fine. They have other issues along that street that they'll have to address. It's a power line issue. Setbacks may be needed because it may be a truck route, who knows?
Sure.
Those will be issues that will be dealt with later, though.
And I know that's something that's not new, because that was mentioned some 2 years ago when Mr. Cook first started this process, and the 3 phases. So I can't see that there's too many surprises here on anything. I mean, it's a preliminary plat, and it's been thought out for several years.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and we've seen this for how long now? It's been over a year
Sure.
that Mr. Cook has been in the development process of this and showed us, and so we've studied this as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Sickler, please, come forward.
It was just stated that that drainage ditch, free-flowing ditch, which is not true. There's stock dams in there, which animals are watering out of there most of the summer. And those, I think, would have to be pushed shut because of the quality of water that's going to be coming into those stock dams. And I hope that Mr. Cook will consider the fence, because I think that's very important there for safety.
I think, Mr. Sickler, I'm going to make one comment. I think it would be good for you to speak with them before the plat goes to the next process, and
Okay.
I know he's been very considerate about other people's requests.
Okay. Thank you.
And from the engineering standpoint, I would like clarification on, there's probably a technical comment about free-flowing water, whether a stock dam is a dam or a pond, and it doesn't impede the general free-flowing of the water through that drainage. Is that a term engineers use? And they'd come to that term by looking at how many degrees something
Right,
goes
well,
down
looking
there.
at just the topography and the drainage through there, there is water sitting there, and there has been all summer, but I guess we were looking at it as a, stock dam or a dugout.
Sure.
If you
It would not impede the water to back it up in such as a,
No, in fact, that'll be eliminated as the process goes on, so.
thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Berton?
as we've talked about in the past, for preliminary, the difference between a preliminary and a final is preliminary is your general overall one. That's where you would condition your plat. So if you're leaning towards the issue of providing, a chain link fence, which I think would be appropriate along Mr. Sickler's property, this would be the time to include that as a condition. You can modify, if you like, proposed condition 2, where I talk about the development agreement, and you can just add, a fence along, I believe it would be lots, let's see, 5 through 8, prior to any development. You could just put fence dedication for lots 5 through 8, and it could be clarified as part of the development agreement if you want to address the issue there. But this would be the time to address it. Final plat is where you move forward with your conditions, you get more detailed information, your lines are fixed. So I would recommend, as part of your deliberation, that you include any conditions with respect to other issues that may not have been addressed per staff's recommended conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Croton.
And if you like, I could just go through them. I don't know if I talked about the development agreement or not.
Go
I
ahead
did?
with it
Okay,
then.
okay.
Go ahead.
It's already been a long morning. I haven't had my coffee. So, on that, I talked about, final plat approval. You have to have a development agreement, including but not limited to the annexation, the city developer responsibilities, funding dedications, park fees, and infrastructure improvements, and fence. And if you want to, chain link fence along lots 5 through 8, if you want to include that, or if you want to modify it in whatever way you want to go, depending on your deliberations.
Mr. Jackson.
Are we talking, if you look at the drawing, are we talking about a fence along lots 5, 6, 7, and 8?
Correct. Now, Lot 5 would be where they're proposing to put their detention facility, and I'm not sure how the designation would be. It would make sense to have that also fenced as well, but there may be some area that needs to be left to be open, for flow or whatever else, but I'm not sure what their ultimate design would be.
Well,
that could be all worked out as part of the development agreement when it comes to final plat approval.
several months ago, we approved the plat, or replat, I think it was, that abuts Mr. Riddle's property to the east. I think Gary Bullinger's developing that, and we didn't make any requirement there. It's many more lots, and I don't know. I think we got a consistency issue here.
With respect to your question, I think that's fair. I think that there was an arrangement worked out prior to it, at least that's my understanding from Mr. Sickler, that the applicant was going to do that. It's your call if you want to add that or not. Mr. Sickler's property is rural residential. Their proposed zoning at the least intensive use is single family, which is a higher intensive use than what it is currently today. So it makes sense if you want to protect the interest for the rural residential to require a fence. I think that's minimal to do that, but it's your call.
If I may,
Ms. Perkle, come forward, please.
thank you. I don't have the benefit of seeing the lots, and I don't know what's there in the numbers you're calling out, but I have rural residential up against the same lots, and I would like the same consideration of a fence, too, because I have animals there, too. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there comes a point in time when you can't place too many burdens on a developer. If there's a cost issue, and if there is a safety issue, it becomes a political issue. Are we going to let the government protect us from everything? I mean, you can look at the other side of it also. So I'd like to hear some more comments from as Mr. Jackson. He said, we did it for one and not the other, and what are we going to do now? I'd like to hear some more comments on that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I
Elkin.
can't see why Mr. Sickler and Mrs. Park couldn't work out some kind of an agreement with Mr. Cook.
Sure.
I think that's what should be done here. Not
Right.
us, we shouldn't be involved in
Right,
this.
I agree with that. Anybody else have comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Jackson that we didn't require it for Mr. Bollinger, so why then would we require it with Mr. Cook? I think if the two property owners could work out the fencing, that would be prudent.
Any other comments on that? Beg of you.
I agree. I agree with the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Nyland. I think, I mean, it's been shown Mr. Cook and Mr. Snyder have worked with other property owners and have given on some other exceptions, so, and I think it would behoove the parties involved to speak with the developer and the developer to speak with the other parties to come to some solution or something that's agreeable. Any other comments?
One more.
Oh, Mr. Sickler, go ahead.
I guess the reason, Mulliners, I supplied the fence there, and I got that done. I did this fall. I could see this housing coming right up against my fence. There's little kids back there, so I put that fence in. And I got that fence down, but I think this could be shared a little bit with the developer too. And I don't, you know, as far as between me and Bulliner, I put all that fence in there, which is done already.
Thank you, Mr. Sickler. And we do appreciate your concern. That's admirable. Mr. Cook.
Commissioners, I guess at this point, what I would like is that either we make a decision that we have to do it or don't have to do it. I don't want it hanging like we did with Mr. Leffer, that we try to work it out, because if it doesn't get worked out, I do not want it to hold up the process we have going. So either tell me I have to or tell me I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. In this case, I personally would like to say you don't. I mean, that's my opinion. We have public comment here.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. I mean, when do we go, I mean, we're going over the line here.
Yep, you're
I mean,
correct.
so heavy-handed. I don't know.
Yep.
Private property rights, Mr. Cook wants to develop. I can understand Mr. Sickler's concern as well as Ms. Parkle's concern, but I agree.
Sure. Thank you, Mr.
We need to
Elkin.
stay out of that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please come forward, Rose.
Rose Sickler. I feel that they're encroaching with their children on bringing their children. I'm not against children or anything, but if their children come over on our side of the land just because they're curious about the horses and get hurt, whose insurance is going to cover this? Ours, of course. We're going to be the one that's sued. And I think there's something should be done to prevent, for safety's sake, that this fence should be put up. And I don't think it should be all our responsibility.
Thank you, Mrs. Sickler. Any other comments? This time I'll close public portion of this hearing and ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I move
Elkin.
the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat for Cook's Meadow Hills subdivision as depicted in the application materials as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, with the additions. Prior to final plat approval, the drainage and grading plan shall be conceptually approved by the city engineer. Also, prior to final plat approval, the city shall approve a development agreement describing and including, but not limited to, annexation, city and developer responsibilities, funding, dedications, park fees, and infrastructure improvements.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
There's a second. Krieg? Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Preliminary plat recommended. Our third item today on the regular agenda is a preliminary plat. It's to consider a preliminary plat for Oxy First Subdivision. The plat is situated in the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 16, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward. This time I'd also thank Mr. Cook and Mr. Snyder.
Honorable Chairman, Commissioners, my name is John Wilczek. I'm from Cattermas, Lee, and Jackson, and I'll be presenting. The property is located in the northeast quarter, southeast 1/4 of the northeast quarter, Section 16, Township 140, Range 96. More familiar would be along Highway 22, North Dakota Highway 22, just south of the Solar Beat location. I believe this has been presented to you before as a plat of 26.63 acres. It has now been reduced to 21 acres. I think comments that have been received before dealt with the access easement that runs along the south line. I guess negotiations have been fruitless with the property owner to the west. He had demanded that he have that access easement in the purchase agreement, so it is still on the plat, and there's really, the owner has no control over it, so I guess that's basically it. I'm here to request approval of a preliminary plat.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Cook? Mr. Jackson?
So what I'm hearing you say is that the person who has the right to that easement wants to maintain that right.
Yes.
So the question is, do we want to dedicate it as a public street if it's going to be there? And what would that, in other words, this owner would have the right to dedicate it as a public street. Is there any reason we want to do that?
Mr. Corton, I'd like to hear.
Mr. Chairman, unless we get comments from DOT, I would not want to dedicate it as a public street. If DOT is not going to allow access to it, it makes no sense to have a dedicated road leading up to their boundary. So I would just let it be an easement as it is. And if they want to come in future and build the road and, dedicate it as we normally do, that's fine. But at this point, I think just let it be as an easement. If somebody wants to retain ownership for an easement, that's fine. The property owner, Oxy, will have to maintain the property and the rest, with respect to whatever conditions are for the easement. But, in the future, if that is a necessary area, that would be fine. But I think the way that the area is developing in there, I don't necessarily see a urgency of having that road dedicated at this point.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I guess I can comment a little bit. I'm pretty familiar with the property owner to the south since it's me. And we've been notified about the private access easement and the access easement to the west about the roadway coming down. So there is an intention, some discussion, I guess, about running a frontage road alongside Highway 22. So on this plot, I'd be in favor of leaving that private access easement because they've talked to us. And I think it's, at some point, it's going to become, a roadway, whether it's Stark County or City of Dickinson at one point. It's going to become a roadway.
With respect to your question, Mr. Tews, has there been any discussions?
Question, it was a comment.
Okay.
Then let's not go there. Has there been any issues with discussing with DOT about access off that? Are they in favor of any access to that portion?
They're only going to allow one approach in that 166 acres, and that approach actually does not line up with where the approach is now. it lines up roughly about 600 feet to the south of where it is, which, if people are familiar with that area, directly aligns with the approach that comes into Key Energy.
Thank you for your insight. Any other comments or questions on that? But with those issues with easement, does that in any way affect what you intend to do?
No.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Coley?
Can I ask Mr. Corton or the applicant, what is this property zoned as currently?
It's zoned as industrial.
It is.
And just a point of clarification, you know, in the near future, I'd like to update our zoning map with respect to, you know, recent county rezones that, you know, may not have, are not depicted on our extraterritorial zone, which this area would be, to try to get that and for clarification purposes. But if I recall right, Mr. Elkin, I think this was done about a year ago.
Yes.
Prior to the recent advancement of the city's ETZ to include this property.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Boggs. If there's anyone else in the public who'd like to make a comment on this preliminary plat, please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make a comment while public hearing is still open? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing and ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to abstain because I do own the property to the south.
Thank you, Mr. Tews. I'd still like to ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plot for Oxy First Subdivision as depicted in the application materials, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Preliminary plat approved. Recommended. Thank you. Fourth item on the regular agenda is a rezoning request. It's to consider a rezone petition from R2 to LC for lots 4 through 7, Block 1, State's 3rd Edition. At this time, I'd ask the party who's presenting, please come forward.
Morning. My name is Neil Messer, and Steve Schwab and myself are the owners of the property in question. We own the vast majority of the lots in State 3rd Edition, and based on what has been going on around us, what you've approved to the west, what has happened to the east, this rezoning request has sort of been triggered by, you know, the actions and what has basically gone on around us. So basically it's there for your information and review. And I guess, I don't know, but certainly stand for some questions if you have any.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, on this, if you would get this rezoned, would you change those lots, leave them the same? What would you like?
Okay. All the lots north of 8th Street are currently R2. The ones that we are requesting, are requesting to go to commercial. The lots on the south of that are R1, and we are probably, again, based on what's happened to the west and east of us, we will probably be coming forth to get those requested to go to R2 to sort of buffer what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. But, oh,
Excuse me?
How about lots 3 and 2?
Those are R2, we would leave those, yes.
Now, did you plan to change the design of these lots if you had these, this group of lots rezoned? And how would you access them from,
Well-
Ninth or Fairway?
Yeah, they're not accessible by Fairway Street, so we'd either have to come in off of 23rd Street or 8th Street for those. Does that answer your question?
It does. Do you know if there's any, are you aware of the possible future proposals of making access off of Fairway?
Unaware of that. It was my understanding that we could not access this property from Fairway Street. Unless that's...
Yeah, and I know there's been future talk, okay? And
Okay.
it was
We'd love it.
mentioned here that Fairway, if a corridor of commercial was put along for Fairway, that there's a good possibility that divider may be removed, so turn lanes and access to lots on either side of Fairway could be accessed.
Yeah, we would...
Mr. Corton maybe can comment on that.
Yes, with its location and the rest, access would be prohibited off of Fairway. You know, when you're referring to the, you know, the recently replatted lots or rezoned lots for Roars on there.
Right.
And I was not aware at the time that was going through, that it was, you know, that the city engineer had pretty much made a determination that access would be prohibited for all those lots, and you'd have to come essentially similar to this here. You know, that discussion, we may allow a break here or there for those ones to the west, but on this particular piece, they would have to grant access off of 8th Street or 23rd, one of those two. They did 23rd, it'd have to be in the middle where you have essentially lots 6 and 7 in order to provide sufficient distance between the two intersections, or, you know, off of 8th Street on there. Being a corner lot with this development, I feel comfortable that the access further to the east is not going to happen. There'll be some trips that somebody may do, but being, you know, they would have to go all the way around it. So I think just the normal design of this, you're not going to have trips going further to the east. They're going to go directly to the west to get access off of 23rd. So I feel comfortable with what they're proposing. Due to the easements that they have on the sites and the rest, if they decided to do this all as unified development, I would recommend they come back and replat it to remove those easements accordingly and to make sure that the plat itself accurately depicts one big lot, if that's what they're proposing on doing in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other questions or
Well,
comments?
the only comment I would make is in regards to access from or not from Fairway Street. Obviously, there's a, what do you call them, in the middle of the road, there's that island in there. If you are going to allow it on the west side, then, you know, we would certainly want to entertain being treated in the same fashion. So I don't see it happening for our property, but if it is allowed at some point, you know, we would want to have the same consideration, because it would obviously enhance the property.
Right, and I think it's a real consideration of engineering and traffic flow and safety, so that's...
Yeah. Well, we're here before you with the understanding that it is not allowed, but if it is allowed somewhere else, then we would request that.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Mayor?
Okay, thank you.
At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone else who'd like to make comment on this rezoning request, please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make comment? Public comment? Mr. Tooze?
Mr. Chairman, I'd much prefer, and I guess I'm looking at Mr. Corton for a recommendation here, but I'd much prefer see the lots in Block 2 rezoned at this time 2 to R2 if the applicant is forthcoming with that, because that does allow the buffering, how we've set it up in the past, but just for lots 7, 6, and 5. Since 3 and 2 of Block 1 are that.
With respect to the question from Mr. Tooze, I wouldn't have an objection necessarily. I haven't had a chance to look at it to give you a definitive answer on rezoning along there. I think that would be fine. I have some reluctancy, of just doing 1 or 2 lots on a block. That being said, the difference on this particular one is it's the end, it's a corner of an area. If they want, if that's the direction that the commission wants to go, we'd have to re-advertise for this because those other ones were not included within the petition request.
Yeah, and I guess our position is, that's, to be honest with you, I mean, that is our intent to make that block, or half a block, R2, but I think he's correct with the publication requirements and that kind of thing. We'll just come back in front of you. We just soon get this approved, and then we'll come back in front of you for the other request. But I agree with Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments at all from the public? Feel free to come forward. Any other comments from the commission? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing. This time I'd ask for a motion. Yes.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the rezone petition from R2 to limited commercial for lots 4 through 7, Block 1, State's 3rd Edition, as depicted in the application materials, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion? Been a second? Discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommendation approval. Thank you, Mr. Messer. This time we have item 5 on our regular agenda is a rezoning request. It's to consider a rezone petition from AG to R3 for the property located westerly of State Avenue and southerly of 21st Street West in the northeast quarter of Section 32, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. On the property, the site is approximately 20 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party to come forward for this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Rick Luthold. I'm with Sanderson Stewart. We're an engineering firm representing the developer here, the Braxton Development Group, out of Bozeman. And just a brief overview with regard to the project. Again, I have several maps on this side here. First, we'll start with this aerial. This is I-94 coming through and Highway 22 here. So 21st and State, the property we're talking about is right here, 20 acres in the southwest corner of that intersection. It is, and that's a little small to see. I think that probably was included in your packet, but that's your proposed annexation areas. It is in this blue area here. It's identified as a parcel that's anticipated for annexation in 2012. On the big map on the wall over here, again, reference-wise, it's on 21st here and State. It's in this southwest corner that we have. The developer is coming forward here with a request for R3 and Ag at this particular point in time. In our discussions with staff, with Mr. Corton, it was requested that there be about 4 acres, or there be a commercial consideration in the corner right adjacent to the intersections. In accordance with your zoning documents, it talks about a community commercial or commercial being utilized in on intersections of higher traffic. This would serve several of the neighborhood subdivisions in the area as it develops. So we do have a 4-acre parcel in the corner which is not subject to this particular zone change right now. We have some discussions with regard to that staying ag at this point in time. We didn't have that changed to commercial in time for you to review and recommend on that today. So we're going to leave the 4 acres in the corner as ag, and we will come forward at a subsequent meeting with that to go to community commercial in accordance with staff request. The remainder, 15.6 acres, we are requesting R3, high-density residential zoning on that. Developer is desiring to put 250 to 300 apartment units in there. There were some photos. I've got them up here on, some of them up here on the drawing also, but some photos submitted to you of other projects they've done throughout the United States. This would be a high-end residential apartment complex. They come in with these properties and traditionally are the highest rents in town. It is a very amenity-driven community development that they have. These are upwardly mobile single families. empty nester types that move back in here who have a desire for those types of amenities, clubhouse types of amenities within their facility, and relatively easy access to community amenities. It's a concentrated living type of facility that we would have there. As part of the overview, again, on State Avenue, we have access along State, we have access along 21st. We will be annexation request coming before the commission here at their next meeting, and we'll be accessing municipal services. We're in the process right now of preparing the sketch plan for plating purposes. In fact, that'll be due back in later today. Anticipating, and we're reviewing it right now, whether we need a lift station on that corner or not. Our anticipations are that we probably will, and we'll work in conjunction with city staff with regard to location and sizing on that for potential use by other developments in the area. I think that provides a fairly concise overview of our proposed uses for the property. The developer, Andrew Braxton, is here with me today and would be happy to answer any specific questions with regard to the type and quality of product he's proposing there. And I would be happy to answer any questions you might have right now. Certainly, we would request that the commission recommend a favorable approval to the City Commission for consideration.
This time, anyone have any questions for Mr. Luffold? Mr. Elton?
Chairman, I do. R3 zoning, I guess this is more for Ed. In your application or in what you're describing here, R3 zoning would allow for the development of residential homes. What sort of residential homes are you talking about? Are you talking about apartment? You're talking about really an apartment facility.
These are apartment facilities similar to what's been identified in some of the photos that have been presented. It is an apartment dwelling type of high density.
These are rental units, is what?
These are rental units, correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Luffold?
Mr. Chairman, I could just add, I could concur with the comments that have been spoken forth thus far. I met with the Braxtons. We spoke about the development. They initially proposed 20 acres, and I told them my concerns at the intersection. I feel that, it's appropriate at the intersections of major roads, that area should be a commercial instead of residential. Due to, providing services, you normally have stop traffic and the rest. It makes more sense to have that commercial. Then I looked at the general area with development expectations, and I felt that, 4 acres would be sufficient. I think that we could apply that standard, at least at a minimum, for, the remaining ones as well along that intersection, just for general ones for the future. That's similar to the Costa-Lecky piece that is under construction as we speak at 15th and in State. They're 5 acres. This would be similar to that. Across the way, I would anticipate to the east a development that would be forthcoming probably in the next couple of months to a year, and that will be a significant commercial component with residential as well. I think the area makes sense to have it as an R3. Further to the west, I would anticipate, more R2 and single family as you go up towards the crest of the hill, more vantage points, and that's kind of the expectation that, as staff that we have, and I think that's probably the same expectation that the City Commission has as well. Our comprehensive plan has looked at this area. Our preliminary land use for this would be a mixed use, which would include both commercial and residential. So, generally speaking, this is in conformance with what we're proposing as well as part of our future land use map with our comprehensive plan. So, just wanted to add those comments. I have spoken about access off of State, and I let them know that probably there'll only be 1 to maybe 2 off of State. The current crest where as you proceed southerly, probably where the line is, where it stops at the commercial, think that's a general area where the crest, that may be one access point, and then further south where they show their most southernmost line, that would be the bottom of the natural topography. Those would probably be 2 access points. We would not grant any more along states in order to control traffic and not to have all kinds of roads within that, and they will design that accordingly. If they decide to design an access to 21st Street East, that road will have to be upgraded. We'll address that issue on the development stage. But if they decided to propose access off of that, that road will have to be upgraded to an urban road standard.
Question on that accessing on 21st, for the residential, access to the residential portion, which is, part of that is west of the little 4-acre commercial corner. Isn't there going to have to be an access there at some point?
With respect to the commercial, that they would provide that?
With respect to the residential.
For the 4-acre piece? To have?
Right west of the 4-acre piece, there'll be residential.
Correct, correct.
Isn't there going to have to be an access at that point for residential?
Off of 21st Street? No, they don't necessarily have to do that. If they want to bring it off the state, they could do it that way. I have a feeling, as part of their proposal, they'll probably propose something off of 21st Street. If they do, then that road will have to be, they'll have to pay a fair proportionate share for the upgrade of having that road, because right now it's a county road, and the shoulders would have to be upgraded. We'd have to look at that in consideration.
And so there'd be several accesses to the residential off of state? Be more than one, right?
Yes, this is going to be unified development. I'd be fine if they had one major road leading in, and then you veer off as you would normally have for a bigger development. That's fine. That makes less road cuts off of State Street. Probably fire department would want to have a minimum of 2. I would concur with that, so I would imagine they're going to propose two access points off of State. So I don't see a problem with that. We've preliminarily discussed that. I just wanted to give you some additional information.
I'd be happy to follow up on that just a little bit further. On a 20-acre parcel like that, if it was purely remaining the apartment units, residential development, we may look at only one access off of State and one off of 21st, or potentially the 2 off of State. You want to have some control with regard to, again, this is a higher end type of development. Your residences want to have some control over public coming and going, so you just don't have a lot of flow-through traffic occurring. Because of the advent and inclusion of the commercial on the corner, I would concur with Mr. Corton's comments that we would, on State, look at requesting both an access to the south there through the dip that would be for the residential properties, one that would serve both the residential properties and the commercial at that separation there on State. And we're probably going to look at an access off of 21st, again, close to that split between the commercial and the residential. Not so much for the residential access. We could suffice with the 2 accesses off of State on that, but more so for the commercial activities. As things develop further to the west and to the north, we're going to want to have access that would service that commercial off of 21st. We recognize that we'll have a responsibility with regard to some of the frontage improvements along 21st as we look at that, and are more than happy to look at that. I guess one other question that I'll need to clarify with Mr. Corton is our annexation right now includes just strictly to the property line. If we're talking about 21st, I need some input probably as to whether we want that, whether that defaults under the annexation rules or whether we want to include that right away potentially in that annexation request. And we can catch up on that after the fact, but we'll want to clarify that because I think we do want to have the ability to include those improvements as we go forward. I guess one other thing, as we talk a little bit about the apartments, and just to put that into a connotation for you, we talk about high-end apartments, but what we're finding and what this developer has particularly found with regard to this product is that people like myself, I'm in my 50s, my kids are all gone, my wife and I want to get out of the big house, but we still want to live in a place that's nice and has appropriate amenities for us, but we may not want to be taking care of a yard. We may not want to have to deal with that. And there's a large percentage of the public now that is going to just simply a rental type of situation. They want to remain mobile. They want to have the ability to move without having to deal with the liquidation of a home or a condo or a townhome. And so that's really what this is targeted at. Your professionals in several other locations where we're working on projects like this with the developer. You have the transient medical community, those folks who come in and work for 3 months to 6 months with the hospitals or with the campus, for instance, in this situation where they have people coming in for a short period of time and want something that's nice, but they don't necessarily want to get into a long-term commitment. Those are the kinds of folks that have been in these facilities. It's not targeted specifically and wouldn't be targeted at, for instance, the oil field workers, that kind of product. This is more of a long-term, like I say, amenity-driven type of facility that they target with this. So, again, if there are any other questions.
Anyone have any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, a question or two here. Would this be like a gated community?
Not intended to be gated at this point in time. Some of the facilities have been in other locations, but this one is not intended to be gated at this point in time.
Second question is, do you own the surrounding property around that? Or do you own just this piece here?
It's just this parcel at this point in time that's being considered for development.
Okay. I guess, you know, we're getting into a situation here of spot zoning. Is there any, Ed, do you know of any other developments that might be surrounding that we can kind of tie in? I mean, I realize this looks like a pretty good proposal, but.
I wouldn't say that this is spot. This is consistent to what, you know, what our comp plan is leaning towards, you know, with respect to land use inventories, and it makes sense, you know, with land use applications, you know, when you want to match up your land use with your transportation networks and the rest. As they proceed, though, what we would require, though, is, you know, as part of the platting of this, whenever if they decide to come through, they're going to have to plat this property officially, would be whatever these roads, we're going to be looking at continuation of those roads. It's not going to just be just a development, it'll have to continue on, it'll be a dedicated road potentially. So we're going to look at, with respect to the overall circulation pattern for this, not just this development, for that whole corridor that we do have. So I think that's probably what you're leading to on the road issue. But I'm comfortable with the way it's been proposed.
And in addition, just as a follow-up to that land use question, we as planners are very sensitive also to making sure that something fits within the context and criteria of what's been developed around it. In this particular instance, as you indicated, you know, we're talking about some density development here, some commercial here. We have two major roads that are intersecting at the area, and Mr. Corton has talked about this property crossed on the other side may come forward here in the near future with regard to some additional commercial and density associated with it. So from the aspect, for instance, the first product that you looked at today, you'd look at this as more of a commercial node, an activity node, and you'd rainbow out from that and get back into some of your residential, similar to what's happened down as you've come the other direction here with residential single-family product that would ring this. So based on our understanding of the development processes that are occurring in the area, we feel we fit into that criteria quite well.
Well, again, I think looks like a good proposal. I just, you know, I heard some differences in access off of 21 or states, 1 or 2, and trying to get a bigger picture of what's going to happen above and beyond that. But I'm
Mr.
realizing
Chairman.
if you don't own that land.
Mr. Jackson?
I think Mr. Krieg makes a good point. You know, we looked at our first 2 agenda items today with large-scale planning. You know, they were quarter sections or nearly quarter sections of land. I agree. I think this proposal looks nice. But I think when we get to the platting stage, and I know Mr. Tews is the owner of much of the property around that intersection, I think we should be asking him to do more master planning, to show us a little bit more from a broader scale as to what's going to happen around that intersection. I think that's what you're getting at.
Right.
And I agree.
I'm Tracy Tews, Dickinson Energy Park Managing Partner. Mr. Krieg, Chairman, I do own the parcel across the road, the R1 parcel, that 45 acres. I own the 56 acres to the north, and I do have the option for the other 110 acres. It is Mr. Braxton's intent to purchase more land adjacent to the west. The intended purchaser for the 45 acres across states already has talked to Mr. Corton and they're doing some pre-planning and do have some intention of coming in here in the next couple months with either a PUD or MUD across the road with commercial on the east side estates and in the corner of 21st. We are in support, of course, of the 20 acres that the Braxton Group is purchasing, or else we wouldn't be selling it to them. The land to the north, there is going to be a PUD submitted for that as well, with mixed uses in there. And we've talked briefly with Mr. Corton, and the problem is with that corner, with the acreage that I do have, excuse me, there's going to be 3 different owners of that corner, and the Braxton Group being one of them. So there is a lot of planning that needs to go on, and Mr. Corton is aiding all 3 groups at this point, so.
Well,
Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
again, regardless of how many groups there are, I think as a city, I think we just need to see more planning. A lift station was mentioned. Who knows, perhaps when we look further, maybe we can eliminate a lift station. Drainage, we haven't talked about parks yet. I think that intersection just needs a broader look, and with you as the seller, you have the ability to drive that little bit, I think. So I think as a board, we need to look to that.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Cruz, did you put track B in there, or was that in there when you purchased the property? Was this already?
Initially, with my option, I had an agreement with the previous landowner to sell Track B to another developer, and that wasn't contingent on any development to go in there. He has since put out to us that he is going to develop R3 and R1 in that area. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might at this time, I want to let the developer, and Tracy knows this well, any improvements made along 21st Street will not be, the county will not pay for those improvements, just so you understand. And those improvements need to meet requirements of our county engineer as well as our road superintendent, and you know that too, right?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Elkin, it has been put out to us several times that any improvements of the land west and north of 21st require annexation. So I'm assuming with annexation,
I'm hoping that
Stark
that
County's
city
not going to step in and
they'll
pay
take
for it.
all over. Yes, I agree.
So, okay. We're aware of that.
Okay.
My original comment on accesses, with only one access, essentially, it's a big cul-de-sac. I mean, with that high density, you know, I'm hoping they follow through with their plans on dual access on both sides of the commercial, which would access the commercial and the residential.
Well, yes, and we'll look at that when it comes to the plating stage, you know, with respect to dedication. I mean, you know, the main piece with 2 access points, they're going to need to continue on to the property to the west. We're not going to just, you know, make it so that the property to the west, the only access that they're going to have would be off of 21st. That wouldn't make sense. It makes sense to have access as well to states as well. So those issues need to be addressed as well as part of the development. But this is for the rezoning, the subsequent review of the plans and the development and the plating and the annexation. We'll have those issues taken care of.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Bye-bye.
getting back to what Mr. Krieg said, you know, this is, and I don't know if it is it kind of looks like a phase again. You know, that this is one of those things where it's kind of being done in phases. And as far as the park district goes, this is exactly what we run into problems with. Because now you got this little section that they want, but what about the rest of it? And who's going to be responsible for, how do you decide who's going to give up 5% of what? That's where the problem's at. So now all of a sudden we got this 20 acres. Well, obviously we're not going to put a park there likely. So we'd end up with cash in lieu, and every time we do that, our 5% gets smaller and smaller and smaller. That's the problem I have with it, is just, you know, I think we were supposed to look at the larger plan. I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody has any comments or can give me an explanation on that.
Mr. Chairman, I could add to that. You know, that's the issue that we've discussed with the Parks District. That's why you're doing your master plan. You're working with KLJ to determine where you would want to have your regional sites. That's forthcoming, you know, in the next couple of months. Prior to that, you know, as a Parks District, you don't have plans to necessarily come in and say, that area, we already have a general idea of where that's going to be. So with respect to your question, those issues will be addressed in the next couple of months with KLJ as part of the Parks and Recreation element as part of our comprehensive plan. Now, if you already have a current area designated with that, that's a discussion purposes you can have with the applicants as we speak. But, you know, for us as a board and as a commission, you know, you have to address, yes, the regional area. That's why we're doing our comprehensive plan. But you also have to factor in, there are, you know, not everybody has the ability to come in with 160 acres at a time. You can only develop, which is Will and Sellers are able to do. So what's in front of us is that. If you're not comfortable with that, you can make a decision that, you know, there's a reason for that, but you have to have a basis to have that. And we are working with you on the determination of where we think regional parks or parks should be. I don't know. You may have comments that maybe you have a proposal for that. It may not be part of that area. I don't know. But that's, you know, that's where you're working with KLJ, and that's where we'll be able to come in. When this applicant comes in, we'll be able to say, you know, at that intersection, we're looking at potentially a regional park. You know, your development expectation is R3, but in reality, that's an area that you need to work with the Parks District because you're going to, a significant portion of that property may be part of a park. So, I mean, you bring up a very valid question, but that also, that is being addressed as part of our comprehensive plan.
And you're right. I mean, that's exactly it, and we don't have the answers. And until we get that plan, this is what we keep running into, and we likely will continue running into. I don't know how to address it either. I don't.
Our current intentions, of course, with this is a cash in lieu of contribution with regard to the parcel that could be utilized, that cash then passed along to the Park District that could be utilized for acquisition or usage on a regional basis. So unless we have further direction and discussion.
Well, and looking at it, it's obvious that's probably what would have to happen, but that gets back to what, you know, I was saying as far, so then when the next one comes, you know, that 5% gets smaller, you know, and you know, until we have that plan, I don't know the answer to it. I don't want to sit there and hinder a development like this because I think it's a good thing, but we could come up, you know, we could have another one just like it, and then basically we're cash in lieu again.
You are, I think I understand the problem, where if you knew what was going to happen to that whole parcel of land, because off of this, you could get 1 acre. And if you could get 4 parcels where the net got 4 acres, I mean, it keeps coming along with 20-acre chunks, and they'd have to co-join, they'd have to have agreements, and somehow to get a substantial amount of property if you so desire property. Otherwise, you are stuck. Or you could take the property for future wheels and dealings or whatever, trading it off, however it is. But you do have a dilemma. I think we understand that. And
Mr. Chairman, one thing I would say, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but are you aware that we're in the process of changing our in lieu payment amount?
Yes, I am aware that there's a process occurring now.
You know, I don't know where we are with that process, but I think I would be reluctant to approve any more final plats, this one, Meadow Hills, any of them, until we have that done, because it's not right where we are right now. So that's the way I feel. I don't feel we want to go forward. But it is more than a park question here. I expect you're not planning on dedicating any streets in here.
We will have some dedication occur with some of the streets. For instance, we've talked here already this morning about maintaining some contiguous access along the, you know, if we have an access here along the south side of the property, that would probably be a contiguous dedicated access that would access future development to the west. That would make logical sense. an access that occurs here around the perimeter of this commercial off of 21st and back over to State will probably be a dedicated access that occurs internal to this. In here, we're anticipating that's apartment and would not have a dedicated access. So again, we have to work with staff with regard to how those mesh and access to the west and fit with other pieces of property, but there will be some dedication that occurs there.
Is the meeting over?
That's the soup whistle there, guys. Watch out.
We'll indulge Mr. Creek. These are strictly apartments. There won't be agreements, there won't be fees for the apartment users as far as what they can and can't do, like you would in a condo association.
This is an apartment complex. It is not set up to be resold either under a condo ownership or a townhome type of ownership. There may be some additional internal fees if they had an additional garage space or something like that, but it's not set up like you would in a condo with an HOA that has common area maintenance, that kind of thing.
So the owners of the complex are going to be responsible once they access off the street, public street. They're going to take care of the property, snow removal, maintenance of that property.
That's correct.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
One question. Can you give me some kind of a time frame? And then also in our packet, it said approximately 300 high-end apartment buildings.
Units.
The apartment.
Should be units, yes.
I assume that.
Be awful tight with buildings on there.
That's what I, but can you give me some kind of time frame? Are you going to build?
You bet.
something?
The developer, like everything, time is money, and so the developer is very anxious to move forward. With your recommendation today to the commission, we're hoping to come to the February 6th commission meeting for consideration of the zone change and the annexation at that point in time, according to the schedule that's been laid out with our staff and consideration of the discussions between our staff and city staff. And then we would have plating, like I say, sketch plan in today. We would have plating follow a schedule through February, March, April, and May, anticipating final action at the secondary meeting in May. Well, excuse me, that would be the early meeting in May, and filing the documents, final plat documents there latter part of May, and beginning construction this spring to have these up and completed as quickly as possible. So.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone else from the public who would like to make a comment on this rezoning request. Please feel free to come forward.
I'm Mike Ravinius. My wife and I live kitty corner from the land that's being proposed. Comparing it to some of the other stuff that's been proposed for the land around us, I think there could be a lot worse things, so don't think it's the worst thing. One thing I think we probably need to really look at, or my concerns with it, are the traffic flow there. There's a lot of truck traffic, oil field truck traffic, a lot of through traffic. So if we start cutting approaches into where there's going to be a lot of traffic coming onto that street there, that's a really dangerous intersection at 21st and State already. Northerly traffic coming over that hill is going way, way faster than they should, and there's not a stop sign there. And firsthand, I can tell you living there, there's a lot of near misses there, and that's the thing I guess I'd worry about the most is the traffic. And the other thing is the bike path that runs along there. If we get that much housing and commercial and whatever else moves into there, that's probably going to have to just get eliminated. If you get a major intersection there, you're not going to want people, and some of that ties into the community, or the rec center and the community center and stuff. All the marathons and the things they have there all run along that road there. So long term, that's some of the things that might have to go away there. I'm not opposed to the whole proposal. I think it's not a bad thing, but the traffic thing, we might have to look at long term, maybe limiting through truck traffic or something like that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ravinius. This time, is there anyone else who would like to make comment? Please feel free to come forward. Any other comments from the commission? I'd like to make one comment based on Mr. Ravinius's comments. Yeah, I think the traffic people will probably look at that. There's probably going to have to be some traffic control. And I am a firm believer that the city has to, and we have to force the issue through different organizations we belong to and things we participate in, that we have to become more walker, biker friendly in this town than we are. And it's something that has to be promoted. And in areas like that, it has to be promoted. The people have to be protected and encouraged to use their other means of transportation than motorized vehicles. I think his comments are very, very well taken. Any other comments? Anyone else would like to make comment on that before we close the public hearing? I feel comfortable, I know Mr. Krieg made a comment about spot zoning, and I feel comfortable so long as our city planner knows what potentially and could come up in Tract B south of there. We have R1 across to the east of this property, and what, if he has any concerns, I would like to hear him now about the rest of the property to the west of this that is now ag, to feel that this is progressing and there's other proposals that will be forthcoming that would fit into this. I'd like to hear that.
With respect to your question, Mr. Chairman, yes, I would prefer it to all come in at one time, have a master developer do it all. In an ideal world, that makes sense. You do 80 acres or 160 all at a time, and you can get it all cleared and rectified at a moment. In reality, it doesn't happen that way because not everybody's able to do that. My idea and vision for that area, this would be compatible with that. With respect, like I've mentioned, the comprehensive plan, we're looking at the land use destination for that area to be that mixed-use destination, which would include both residential and commercial. Due to its location, due to the existing transportation networks that we have. This is prime real estate for higher density, also for significant and very valued single-family housing, along with commercial. I mean, this is going to be, this area to the west is going to be some of the highest valued real estate in the city that I anticipate for the future. So the plan that they have proposed and the other developers that I've spoken to conceptually and preliminarily to the east and also to the south and also further to the west and to the northwest, this would be consistent with that. The developer to the south would like to meet with me. They were proposing to put essentially 20 acres to do all R3. I told them that the area across from highway or from State Road or from 15th Street west would need to be commercial, at least 5 acres, to be similar to what the Costelecchis would be on the reverse side of that. That makes sense. The 15th would continue on. I don't see that 15th would go all the way up to the water tower. That makes no sense. I see 15th kind of meandering to the north and into the west, and then proceeding that way as a major collector. So they're going to modify their plans. We're going to try to meet. I think it's a conference call on Thursday. So that's kind of my idea. That's my idea. As a commission, you don't have to agree with it, and I encourage you to, if you don't feel comfortable with it, to obviously make your comments. That's your job. And then they would blend in, as Mr. Tews has mentioned, potentially some single family with the multifamily as well. If you look at the map that has been proposed, the R1 that is depicted, or the property across the street on State and to the south of 21st and to the north of 15th, I believe that's going to be one big developer, a master developer that's going to come in. I haven't spoken to them directly. It's my understanding that they're going to propose to put a commercial section that at the southeastern intersection of 21st Street and State. I would be in favor of that. That makes sense to have a good commercial block there for a nice commercial complex. I believe they're going to propose more commercial along State proceeding to the south, a swath of linear commercial. You know, I have mixed feelings with that. You know, I don't necessarily in favor of long swaths of commercial strip. I think that if you do, at intersections, it makes sense to have commercial designations, and then the land between two intersections, maybe in the center portion, that could divert or transition to maybe a high-density residential or maybe even single-family if you do it right, instead of just having linear commercial patterns. But I'm not necessarily opposed. I'll have to see what they propose. To the east, I have explained to Mr. Tews and to each person that's talked to me that they need to protect the wetlands and the stream area. The area that is abutting it is prime real estate. That should be residential single family that abuts that, to be comparable on the opposite side. With working with the Parks Department to have a trail system to go through there. I think when that development went through years ago, it was a shame that that was not put to have a linear trail system on the opposite side. This is our opportunity to get that, and that would benefit the community tremendously to have a preserved buffer. Either it could be hard surfaced or it could be passive, depending on what the use would be, but to preserve that area to make it an amenity, and also encourage wildlife habitat as well. So that would be my idea with it. We'll have to coordinate and work with you. Obviously, you'll have your comment period whenever that comes through as a development, either as a PUD or coming through the planning process. Further to the northwest, I've spoken to the developers on that, different ones. They would like to propose a mixed-use development, maybe some commercial along 21st Street, and then transition to more of a multifamily to single-family as well. We'll see how that comes to fruition. That kind of makes sense along 21st Street. Any additional development along 21st Street, as a city, we have let them know that 21st would have to be upgraded, would have to be annexed into the city, and that road would have to be an urban service road to address the traffic all the way through the lot that they would have. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chairman. Kind of how I look at it, how I, as a land use planner, it makes sense to develop it due to we have urban services that are there, sewer, water is available. We have a good transportation network. It's prime land for potential revenue for the city, along with necessary multifamily housing that we need, and single family as well.
Thank you, Mr. Croton. And I hope this addresses some of the concerns that Mr. Krieg brought up about spot zoning, and that there's really someone who's looked at the future development there. We haven't seen it out yet, but it is there, and you've talked to many parties, and I hope, I mean, that concern, I think, is real important that we realize that. Any other comments or questions? This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I move we recommend approval of the rezoning position from Ag to R3 as depicted in the application as meeting the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, with the additional requirement that prior to the final approval of this rezoning petition, the property is annexed.
I'll second that.
Then a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'd like to just say one more thing.
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I really don't have any issues with the land use part of this. I think it's very appropriate. This is going to be the heart of the growth of our community in this northwest quadrant. We need to really make sure it's done well, and I think this will be a part of doing it well. I do still have a concern that we're not looking in a broader area. We do have commonality of ownership around this intersection. So we can do more of a master plan look to this area. I don't believe there should be a problem with that. And I think we need to do it. We need to do it not only for parks, but we need to do it for street flow, we need to do it for sewer, we need to do it for a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to be looking for that when we see the plat on this.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carried. Recommend rezoning request to be approved. Thank you very much. This time we have a preliminary plat, item 6, preliminary plat for replat. To consider a preliminary plat for the replat of the Hausauer subdivision located in the southwest quarter of southeast quarter of section 26, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. At this time, I'd ask for the party.
Good morning.
Come forward.
I'm Diane Hausauer. Stan and I own this property. We are located on the outskirts of East Dickinson, within a mile of the city limits. What we'd like to do is we would like to take the 11 lots that are there, and we would like to consolidate them into 2 lots, forming blocks 1 and 2. Block 2 is where we now reside. We'd like the option of being able to, the reason we're doing this is we'd like the option to be able to sell those, block 1, those 9 lots as 1 unit. And in order to do this, we also need to vacate the street that is between blocks 1 and 2.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Hausauer? Do you plan on building on these yourself, or?
We have, our daughter would like to, has expressed an interest in buying that block 1. It would be a single dwelling.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? We're going to wait for Ed to come back, maybe get a comment from him, but Mr. Nodland.
Mr. Chairman, Diane, so we're going from actually 3 units. I mean, we're going to end up with 3 different units.
Actually, 2.
You have your unit where you live?
Yes. Plus, we're adding, we would have to add 2 1-acre plot, lots to it.
To yours?
Uh-huh.
And then have 2 other units to sell, or 1 other unit?
Just 1 other unit.
Okay.
Block 1, yeah.
If I could.
Yes, Mr. Eldridge.
At the present time, there is no street to access Lot 1 at the present time. You
There
plan on
is
putting that in,
an,
right?
there is an easement, well, that would be our land. Right now, the street just goes into our house.
Right.
But it would go straight north.
So you plan on eliminating those trees down below there? Is that what you plan on doing?
Do you mean on the, next to the 21st Street?
Yeah.
They
I mean,
probably,
coming into your property right now, you're...
that's an
looking at it
easement.
there.
That's an easement.
Yeah.
And those trees belong to Mr. Jim Galka.
Okay.
We are using, we have an easement through his lot. Yeah, I think those trees would have to be removed.
And you do understand that that would be that would be a cost of
Right.
yours?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. I talked to Mr. Catan, and we said that would have to be taken care of during, when they do their building permit.
Yeah.
The vacated street is the one that runs east and west between Block 1 and Block 2.
Do you know how large that easement is that you have?
I don't.
You don't know? Because normally when a property, even though it's a relative, that is divided up and you're going to sell or give up ownership of part of that, block 1, which would be, there should be permanent access to that lot or that block obtained by the new owner. So in the future, whether you own it, they decide to sell it, whatever, that it should follow with the property. So there will be a large enough easement to access that property for any future owner?
Yes. Yeah. I'm assuming, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
you know, this is seemingly a simple action that we're contemplating, but it's a half mile from the developed city limits. We're on a quarter line here. I don't know what the topography is like, but I think there's a very good chance that this could be some kind of an arterial some years from now as the area develops. I think we have to look at this a little bit more seriously. So is this a preliminary plat request?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
So I would suggest that before we approve the final plat, we ask the city engineer to address the street width and location to make sure it fits with future street planning in the city. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Corton?
With respect to your question, Mr. Jackson, yes, that makes sense. I think it'd be appropriate if you want to add a condition for the approval of that the city engineer, that the future dedication or future streets need to be approved to the satisfaction of the city engineer.
The point is that this is in the middle of a mile. We don't know. This could be a significant street someday. I expect you don't want that. But as a city, we may have to look that way.
Yeah, it's 18th. It's 18th Street.
So we need to know that, I think, before we approve this.
I think that's very important. I've been tough on going along with street vacations. And I mean, is there any possibility you could build on this property? I mean, there is a possibility you could use it the way you want to without anything being done. Is that right?
I think so. I'm not sure.
So future accessibility and streets, arteries are a big concern. I think I hear Mr. Jackson fairly clear on that.
Now, you're talking about the street that's going north and south, right? Yeah. I'm talking about the street that's going east and west that we want to vacate. The street that's between the lots.
Sure, and that may be fine for now.
And you're talking about the access to the...
I'm talking about the north-south, but I'm also talking about 21st or Radar-Base Road. You know,
Yeah.
we're only showing 33 feet of dedication there. We're going to want more than that. I know we are. It'll probably need to be 75 feet or something. And I just feel we'll probably want more on the north-south as well.
So right now, Mr. Chairman, if I might, right now, we're showing 30 feet north-south. That's not near enough from a county perspective, I can tell you that.
But I think we need to rely on our city engineer to tell us, is there potential here or not for it to be an arterial? If so, how many feet do we need, both on the east-west and the...
But couldn't those details be worked out in the final plat of this whole thing?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we could ignore that today, because all we're asking for is vacation.
That's right. But that's what I'm saying, before we do the final plat.
I think that would be a good way to have contingency placed on this.
Well, Mr. Chairman, yes, and I think you bring up very valid points. So that could be looked at to see if any of those natural, with respect to the property itself, either the north-south or east-west, do any of those existing connections look like they would be potential dedicated roads to come through, and if that's the case, then this is the time to get those dedications for that. I don't think the east to west would, the north to south would be about the only one, but, you know, I'd have to look at it, look at an aerial with the city engineer and really say, okay, does 18th Street look, you know, going further to the north, does this make sense? You know, if it does not make sense, then then having a dedication of that doesn't, I don't think it would be warranted. But if it does make sense to have an extension that way, then we'll go ahead and do that. But we got to look at it with topography and with the existing areas in it. This is one of those plats that was platted years ago, and it may not reflect where we would normally have a development pattern. So I think your condition is very appropriate, and I'll have the city engineer and myself will look at that before they come through with the final plat and provide a recommendation to you.
Any other discussion? Any other questions? Tom?
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make a comment on this preliminary plat or replat. Please feel free to come forward. If being none, are there any further comments? This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing. I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
I move that we recommend approval of preliminary plat for the replat of Hassauer subdivision as depicted in the application materials as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, with the exception that the final plat not be considered until the city engineer gives us a recommendation as to street right-of-way locations and widths.
Been a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. At this point in time, we're taking a 2-minute recess.
that Dickinson is currently experiencing would allow a higher density, and this would be beneficial for both the city and the developer, since we do have the need for housing. We would be talking about potentially a mix of townhomes, condos, apartments, and this would give the city permanent housing versus the manufactured homes. And it would also eliminate the individually deeded lots from having access out into, I believe it's 8th Street or 9th. Anyway, it shows in my map here. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions at this point in time?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Corton.
I could add to that. I had met with Mr. Langle, and we had spoken about this. You know, I'm not sure on the prior history of how the mobile home district evolved over, you know, several years back, but with respect to the industrial development across the street and with, I believe it's 8th Street or 8th or 9th Avenue that you have, we have on other developments, since I've been here, limited the access off of 8th Street, off of the avenue, in order to provide, a more readily accessible a roadway, and this would provide us with an opportunity to restrict that instead of what they currently have today, in which, the way it's platted, each of the smaller lots would have access off the avenue. I feel this makes sense based upon the current development that they have around the area. The applicant owns the properties, if I recall right, to the west, where it would transition into the mobile home areas. If that's not the case, then maybe that half block that to the west of 6th Avenue, then maybe that could be more of a transition to go to more of a single family instead of the proposed R3 zoning that they're having. But overall, I think this makes sense. There is additional need to have apartments or higher density on the southeast side of town. I think that over the next couple of years, with development with the oil industry proceeding further south, if all expectations and do happen, that having additional apartments to the south would be a benefit, and being along these major roads makes sense as well.
Thank you, Mr. Croton. Any comments or questions at this time?
Mr. Lango, can you just give us a little more detail on on your development? I think I heard you say apartments, townhomes, condos.
Well, what we have right now is individually deeded lots zoned MH, and it wasn't our intention to do anything with the configuration at this point. So we'd have to look at what the market brings, what the market would demand. So I think we just want to stay within the R3 zoning. But the conversations that we've had have been for a few high-density apartments, a few townhomes, and it's kind of a mix, but we don't have any plans right now. We just wanted the opportunity to rezone if possible, and then we would formulate plans, and at that time, we'd of course have to come in for the permits.
I think it makes sense. I think the request makes sense. There's maybe nobody here who was involved long ago, but this was developed as a place to develop manufactured homes in Dickinson. Recognizing that as a niche in the housing array, if you will. Fifth Avenue, if you drove Fifth Avenue, it is pretty much predominated by manufactured homes. And I know at the time that was the intent down here, is to see that as a place that would gather manufactured homes. But other than that, I think it makes sense.
Mr. Nodland.
Well, wait, I guess I'll ask Mr. Croton later. When we're done with
okay.
this gentleman. I'm sorry.
And you say you own the property now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just for public, is there any residents on the property at all now?
No, there's not. Adjacent to this property, I believe the east half of blocks 3 and 4 are currently vacant, but they have been sold, Mr. Corton, and they are planned for manufactured homes. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you said blocks, the east half of what, blocks 3 and 4, you say?
Yes.
West half?
West half, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, west half.
Yes, west half.
They want to continue on.
The parties that we sold them to said that they were going to put manufactured homes on.
There are a number going in on Block 3 right now.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? this actually doesn't put a burden on the engineering, the infrastructure at all, as far as water, sewer, all, that's already there?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe so. You know, across the way, KLD is developing their subdivision, their industrial subdivision, and they're putting in lines. Preliminarily, we feel that we have enough capacity in that area, so I don't anticipate, a major difference. When you factor in the potential density that they could put in today with respect to the, apartments and the rest, it may actually be about the same, or it may be less, depending on how it's ultimately developed. So I think it's either 6 or a half a dozen on that particular piece.
Mr. Chairman, Ed, I know that I drove through here yesterday. A lot of this appears to have been already developed for mobile homes. So water and sewer, you don't feel are in there right now? All the electrical connections appear to be there.
I believe they extend along the roadways, but not the interior of this development. It's along A Street, along the avenue and the rest, but I haven't checked into that directly. I don't see that it increase, I think the question was increasing the density potentially, or the intensity of this project would adversely impact our sewer water. I don't see that.
I thought that maybe some of that had already been laid in here, but I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Just one.
Mr. Nolan?
And Mr. Corton, are these streets maintained by the developer or the city right now?
The streets right now have been dedicated to the city. As far as I know, I think all of them are dedicated to the city.
But there are no streets there.
Correct.
No.
They're dedicated, but they're...
They will be future dedicated to the city, yes.
Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
And with respect to, the multifamily portion of that, they do have easements for these lots. If they come through with a big apartment complex, they'll probably come back and replat, let's say, Block 9 of that, and remove a lot of the easements in order for them to develop that as a big apartment. So we've generally spoke about that as well, that depending on what their development expectation is, they may be coming back with replatting this whole thing to have bigger lots to accommodate the either twin homes or townhouses or apartments as well.
So that can be easily done in the future. The big issue today is the rezoning request, right?
That is correct.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who would like to make a comment on this rezoning request. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make any further public comment? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing. I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Committee recommends approval of the rezoning petition from MH to R3 for the lots 10 through 18, Block 3, lots 12 through 22, Block 4, lots 1 through 22, Block 5, lots 1 through 18, Block 6, lots 1 through 18, Block 7, lots 1 through 22, Block 8, lots 1 through 22, Block 9, lots 1 through 18, Block 10, lots 10 through 18, Block 11, Southview Homes Edition, as depicted in the application. Materials as meeting the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal City Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Thank you, Mr. Krieg. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Nolan? Any further discussion? For the record, Mr. Kovach, do you know if originally there was property or money in lieu of property on this property when it was first laid out? No. Okay, thank you. Just a thought. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have item 8. We have a zoning text amendment. Is our next item on the regular agenda. To consider a zoning text amendment to add a new overlay district called Corridor Overlay District for major roads and to include standards for building and site design. Mr. Corton, I would ask for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to being 10 o'clock, it's your call, whichever way I could walk you through this, or I could specifically kind of highlight some areas. There are some amendments or some areas I'd like to bring up, and I could just address those. So what would be the pleasure of the commission?
I'd highlight it and bring up anything that you think we should consider today, and we can come back to this. This is going along fairly well?
This is for adoption, or if you want to table it, it's your call. This is, we've advertised it. I think that this, the document itself is, is a document that we discussed over several months and how to address rezoning, specifically industrial, along our major corridors. We had talked about developing a corridor overlay district in order to address site and design issues, land use, and pedestrian lighting, and this is the culmination of that.
I think it's important that this be moved forward. If anyone has any time constraints, we'll consider it, but I think this is of the utmost importance to move along with this.
I'm more than happy to give you at least an hour and a half presentation.
Mr. Chairman, you said it. We've looked at this a couple, 3 times before.
This has got to go along.
Mr. Cotan can show us the changes, but I think I'm ready to recommend this, that we move it up the line here.
I think we need to see this moving along then.
Right.
And he can speak fast and accurately.
Actually, what I'll do then is I'll talk about the items that, reading through it, I want you to be comfortable with. The intent of this is to establish and enhance standards for buildings, landscaping, and other improvements constructed on properties bordering and within the identified transportation corridors, and I'll specifically talk about those. That's for the public, so they're generally aware of what we're discussing. Under 2A, we had designated transportation corridors. I'm very comfortable designating Highway 22, I-90 highway corridor, that would be the interstate, so any of the ones that are backing along there, Villard, and then the business loop. I do have some, second thoughts of maybe should we include State Avenue and 10th Avenue and 21st Street. This is a corridor overlay district. It's kind of, we're trying to protect our gateways. Those are more internal. I'm fine with leaving them, but, the more I think about it, the initial intent was to preserve the areas that are coming into our city. Those are already internal-wise in our city. So do you want to continue to leave those? And it will be obviously our gateways coming in, and then those will be some of our major arterials that we have in the city. Do you want to continue, do you want to have this in addition to that? I think normal development will be consistent to what we propose, but there are also occasions in which people will propose buildings that are less attractive. So I'm fine with leaving it as is, but I wanted to bring that up for discussion purposes before we proceeded any further.
Mr. Chairman?
Number 2.
And Mr. Corton, I think if we include State 10th and 21st, we should also include the track that we just talked about down there. I think it's 8th, which is that truck route that goes to the east. And that's my only, or 9th, excuse me, that's what it is. It's 9th Avenue as well.
Yeah.
That's my only comment.
It's a good suggestion, because, that if it builds up, it's going to be an attractive place to be, and we should probably consider that. How often would you say this should be reviewed if something is put in that could be removed?
It could be amended at any time that we see fit for that, but, this is very consistent to where we're going by public comments and the direction that we've got for the comprehensive plan. So, in essence, this may be a document, the initial document, and I think from the comprehensive plan and the comments that we've received, that I would envision that probably in the next year or two, we'll come back with commercial and industrial design, which would be applicable for all developments. This is kind of a prelude for that, to address our main corridors while we have a chance, because they're being so developed at such a rapid rate. So that's why I think the urgency of this plan here, but in a year or two, we may remove this document and have general overall guidelines for commercial and industrial that would impact everybody, and then there wouldn't be a need for this, and you would remove that at that point. So, but I think it's needed right now, absolutely.
think it'd be better to include something additional?
I'm fine with the way it is, but I understand, Commissioner Tooze's comments on it. It will be needed because we do have industrial zoning on that, and if they're going to be fronting off that road instead of KLD's project, I think that they pretty much, the way it was developed is that all the access is interior up until A Street, so the back of the buildings would probably be facing next to the roadway, but, this is more intended for the front facades. But still, it's an issue that, we should look at. I guess it's how broad do you want to apply to this district?
Any other comments on that suggestion from Mr. Tooze, as far as inclusion of other streets? Any ideas on that?
Well, the other street that I might throw in would be 40th, or it's now 34th.
34, yeah.
34, 38, whatever they call it.
I think the city's calling it 40, aren't we?
City calls it, well, 34th on the one side, I believe, and 40th on the other.
The county has it at 32nd, and then the 40th is in the city, so we could just describe that corridor if you like to, 32nd and 40th, 32nd Street, 40th Street slash, in there.
34th.
34th, yeah. Yeah, we could do that and define it that way. That makes sense, to include that road as well, because that road is going to be developed in the very near future, so.
I think it'd be wise to put it in now, because it can always be taken out. I mean, but it's easier to do it now than try to do it later.
I don't know if this makes Mr. Colling squirm or not, but I absolutely think we'll be revising this ordinance within the next 6 months or 9 months. But I think we should do it, take our best stab at it.
Mr. Coley, could you give an opinion, would you think?
It doesn't make me squirm. I think we can deal with that. So I'm fine with moving the ordinance forward.
And what we could do as part of this whole idea, is, and I'll touch on it later, would be on page 3, we talk about, the city providing application materials. That would be something that our future planner that would be split with the county and also with the city. This would be one of the duties that I would present to them, would be taking pictures of sites that work and ones that do not for a comparison contrast. That works really well. A picture is worth 1,000 words of explaining kind of what you're trying to get at, and we could provide that. I've done that in the past when I've had commercial and industrial and residential design guidelines. They have pictures to show, this is what we're looking for, and everybody goes, oh, okay, now I understand what you're talking about. And that could help out as well. Plus a map that shows where these areas are depicted. Instead of, we describe it in here, but we'll have a subsequent map that will be outlined of where the areas that would be applicable with this ordinance. Down below on that, we talk about that this overlay district provisions apply to the base zone only. We're not changing rezoning for this. This is an overlay for additional development standards. So whatever is there currently or what will be rezoned in the future will have to apply to this. The next one talks about exemptions, standard ones for that. Under number 5, for building design shall incorporate materials that convey permanence, substance, timelessness, and restraint. And then we further describe the multiple materials or elements that you could provide in order to accommodate that. Essentially, what we're trying to do is remove the corrugated steel one style building and trying to upgrade the appearance more of a commercial appearance, even if it's residential, for in the front facade. And then also controlling some outside display and storage as well, which we have talked about trying to do. Ground floor, under number 4 on page 3, it says the ground floor building facades of commercial and office buildings shall have a minimum of 20% glass windows. This is more to try to provide some, some additional articulation or architectural enhancement. And I would be fine to have faux windows. And faux window would be a window that doesn't go through, but outside it appears to be a window. It provides a breakup of that. I'm fine with that as well. So on the next page, roof-mounted and ground-mounted mechanical equipment shall be fully screened. I think this is something that's nice to do. To try to make it so that you can have higher parapet walls in order to break the appearance of that. And then on the number 11, to assist in the interpretation of the above regulations, the planning department shall maintain a catalog of approved building designs and materials that will enhance the development community. That's a fun project to do, so I may not give that to the planner, but, that's stuff that I enjoy doing, but I just don't have the time. Under B, multi-buildings and mixed-use projects, number 1, prior to issuance of any building permits on a multi-building development, the applicant shall submit plans to demonstrate a use is consistent with the design elements throughout the project. I think this is something that is very needed. An example would be you come in with a commercial plaza. All the buildings should be comparable to one another instead of haphazard, no continuity involved with that. This would give me, along with you, if it was appealed, the ability to say, okay, you need to make the buildings to be complementary to one another. They need to have an overall theme to that process. Unfortunately, that's not been done a lot of times. It only makes sense. It's the enhancement for all projects for the developer to have, general consistency of the building design. On number 3, I wanted to bring up a question. It says, number 3, it says freestanding garage clusters for multifamily residential sites should not be placed along the corridor overlay district. I wanted to add additional language, and I'll have to work with Matt on this. Essentially, what I wanted to say is, unless the overall appearance represents a residential design appearance, what I'm referring to on that is normally when you have garages that are next to the road, it's an afterthought. What Roars have done, I think, is a good idea. You could put faux windows in, you could provide some articulation and make that garage that's next to the roadway to break up the noise, but that garage doesn't have to be designed as a basic unit. It could have an appearance of a residential structure, so when you're driving by, you see it looks like a residential structure designed to it. I think that would be allowable. If they want to make their garage just very basic, then that would not be applicable. You need to put your garage back behind. So I wanted to see if you would be in favor of that, to allow me the ability to be able to work with people if they have a good design, that they could put the garages in front, similar to what Roars did along State Street.
I think that's a good idea, because, in some places, you're not allowed to put the garage out front at all. Some places you go and all you see is a garage sitting out, and the house is totally behind it, and it's just looks like one big garage. And then a lot of areas you can't do that, so. And during some of our corridors that we have, if you had a nice looking garage that was up front next to the roadway, that would reduce the noise for that development and make it so that it may be along a high collector or an arterial, but back behind it you have noise attenuation. You've reduced that by having that garage there. So this would allow me the ability to work with somebody, and if they don't do it, and if they don't make it similar to what the building is going to look like, then they could challenge my decision, and we talk about that later as part of the appeal and come to you. So. Next page on there is pretty standard things, building setbacks. The one issue I want to highlight is 1A, where it says building sites along major intersections along the identified corridors that we've talked about shall be sited at the corner of the intersection with parking areas in the rear. What we're trying to do here is make the buildings to be close to the intersection, and then the parking to be in the backside. Instead of emphasizing parking at our major corridors, the parking would be in the rear and the building would be up front with landscaping. Aesthetically, that makes a lot more sense. And this would provide me the ability to require that to flip their buildings if they decided to do a basic design. Natural features, essentially, this gives me some ability to work with people to try to have them blend in their development. With that, it does say reasonable use, so it's not, I don't have ultimate control to require that. I think that's fair. There may be in some situations in which that they may need to work with natural features, and I think we should have that in there as an encouragement, as a carrot more than a stick on approach to that.
On the next page, pedestrian accommodations, this is applicable for commercial uses. Essentially, what we're trying to say is the pedestrian accommodations and the lighting shall complement, decide, and enhance direct pedestrian mobility and movement. You had alluded to that earlier, Mr. Chairman. I think that our sites, if you have a big site, if you have a big parking lot, you should provide a pedestrian linkage within that, so people don't have to walk right along the drive aisles and have to worry about people pulling out of their cars. You would have a designated area maybe in the middle for that. This would be on larger developments, but still, it just shows them that they need to factor in how the pedestrian would work, pedestrian component should work within their development. And then the last one's the administration. This would go through, they would submit this, they would have to meet these requirements as part of their building permit, and city staff or myself would review that in conjunction or with respect to this development to make sure that they would meet that. And they do have an appeal process, and that's noted on page 7. So with that, I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Well, I'd like to commend you on your work on this. I think it's, it's a long time coming. We've needed this. It's an excellent start, probably almost a complete document. It's addressing issues that we should have addressed a long, long time ago, but this is great for the development that's going to come here, and it's already here. It's too bad we can't address some of the issues that exist, that we couldn't go along and change some of the views that we see now, but this is going to, I always said that this, is going to make Dickinson be better, look better as we go down the road. It's going to be a better place with every development, with every step. And this document here is going to help that. Any comments or questions on the document or for Mr. Corton? So at this time, would you like a motion for this to continue on to the City Commission?
Yes, I'll make a motion to recommend approval.
Okay. I'd ask for a motion, please.
I guess the only question on the motion issue would be, do you want to add 34th, 40th Street to that? I'll add that per direction, and then 9th Avenue, the additional corridors.
I would like the person who makes the motion, make sure that's included in that motion. If could entertain that motion. Who would like to make that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment to add to the new overlay district called the Corridor Overlay District for major roads, and to include standards for building and site design as depicted in the application materials as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The Commission also recommends the attaching staff's proposal conditions described in the staff report or the conditions described at the meeting, with the condition and the addition of 34th Street or 40th Street, whatever, to this corridor overlay.
And 9th.
And 9th.
9th.
9th Avenue Southeast.
Southeast.
10th Avenue. East is already there.
I think it's 9th Avenue Southeast, but
9th Avenue Southeast, okay.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approval. Thank you, Mr. Corton. This time, our next workshop will be held on February 14th, 2012, and that will be at 7:10 in the morning. And I'd ask Mr. Corton, when will the next development, the PAC or a development presentation be done? Do you know? For the comprehensive plan.
the next meeting that we have, we're having a open public hearing at tomorrow at the Badlands Activity Center at between 5 and 7. At 5:30 is going to be the presentation for that. It'll be a 30-minute presentation, and then from there they'll invite the public to go to the different booths in order to comment on land use, transportation, aesthetics, similar to what we've done in the past. Unfortunately, by the time that this tape is up here, it'll be past the event on that. So I just hope that the public does attend it, because it's very critical to get your comments in with respect to the future land use, because based upon those comments, the consultant's going to go back, we're going to meet with the staff again, and then we're probably going to have my proposal, and this is yet to be accepted, would have a joint City Commission, Planning Commission meeting to have the presentation of the future land use and other development strategies to get your recommendation for approval, and then proceed forward for the adoption process of that on an interim basis until the comprehensive plan is finalized, so that you can, as a commission, use the future land use map as part of your decision-making and have some validity to that, instead of using it as a recommended document if you want to go that direction.
Have the markers been used up on that map?
Nope, there's still plenty of space left, so you're more than welcome to use it.
Anyone have any, the map, do it now before tomorrow night?
Or you could attend the meeting tomorrow night and discuss that as well. That's the purpose of the meeting. So I encourage all of you to attend. Hopefully we'll have a good turnout, and we're moving forward on it. I'm very excited. Things are starting to come together for the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Any other business that